It's Friday, the 31st of January, 2025.
The last word in podcasting news. This is the Pod News Weekly Review with James Cridland and Sam Sethi.
I'm James Cridland, the editor of Pod News.
And I'm Sam Sethi, the CEO of True Fans.
I think there's just so much that we can learn from one another.
Andrea Koskai on Eurowaves and why it's a new useful tool for podcasters everywhere. Also in the chapters today, has TuneIn tuned out of new podcasts? Audio podcasts have a 150% higher listen-through rate than video podcasts. PodX has bought someone else. And which podcast has won the Political Podcast of the Year? This podcast is sponsored by Buzzsprout with the tools, community and support to ensure you keep podcasting. Start podcasting, keep podcasting with Buzzsprout.com.
From your daily newsletter, the Pod News Weekly Review.
Buzzsprout, our sponsor. A little bit of a congratulations is due to them. What have they done?
Yes, TechRadar have said in a review of all of the best podcast hosts, they reckon that Buzzsprout is the best podcast hosting company. Also in that list, Podbean, Libsyn, Captivate and Transistor. But Buzzsprout gets the number one overall, which is always nice for our sponsor. So hurrah.
Hurrah. How do they measure that, though?
They measure that with lots of different things. So basically, they say, so for example, Captivate is the best for corporates. It says, and professionals, Libsyn is best for no frills. Let's not go there. But Buzzsprout...
Is that a euphemism? Sorry, is that a euphemism for no features?
I think one of the downsides that they gave there was complicated interface, I'll say. Buzzsprout was best overall. They like the excellent customer support. Hurrah. They like the easy-to-use interface. They don't like the fact that you get charged per podcast show. Well, it's one way of charging. And they also don't like the idea that there's no private podcasting. Well, that's not what Buzzsprout's all about, but it certainly is what some of the other ones are all about. So, it's a nice release and everything else. I should say that a few friends of the show have been in touch and said, why did you focus on that? Their list hasn't actually changed in the last 4 years. Well, that might be because Buzzsprout's still a pretty good service. Certainly useful, at least seeing all of that.
Excellent. Well done, Buzzsprout. Now, there's some new figures out, James, for the industry. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. Give me the highlights.
Yeah, some of it is good, some of it is bad. This is ad revenue for the industry, the podcast industrial complex, as Adam Curry calls it. The IAB do a study of ad buyers, and they say that, podcast ad spend will still go up this year, but not by much. Total advertising is set to grow by 7.3%. Podcasting will just beat that at 7.4% growth this year, and that's likely to be less than it was last year. And they are talking about its market share dropping. And this was a surprise. A company called S&P Global Market Intelligence has said that the US podcast industry, which you might remember, hit $1.9 billion in 2023. They have confidently said that it's not going to hit $2 billion in revenue until 2032, which is quite some time in the future. I think they've got it wrong, personally, but it's always interesting to see what these people are saying. I mean, if the IAB has said that podcasting grew over the last year by about 14%, then you can expect, therefore, us to hit the 2 billion revenue when it's announced in May. But, we'll see what S&P end up saying. Interesting little note from Acast's Greg Glenday, who posted something a little bit grumpy on LinkedIn about the IAB. It's the IAB's 2025 annual leadership meeting in Palm Springs. Good luck with meeting in there at the moment. It's three $4,400 if you want to go, by the way, and you're a member of the IAB.
What if you're not a member? How much does it cost you then?
$4,400 if you're not a member. Can you believe?
Yes. Won't be going for either reason.
No, I mean, I won't be going to either of those. But anyway, that's a proper shindig, isn't it? But Greg Glenday from Acast said that he was disappointed that podcasting barely registers a footnote, even in the shadow of the podcast election. And he added, this is one of the fastest growing parts of the creator economy, and it's still undervalued and misunderstood. Maybe this means that the podcast industry is waking up to the fact that the IAB is not their friend and that they should be moving away and doing something better. If it was up to me, we would all be funding our own podcast advertising bureau and not leaving it to people who are also selling video pre-rolls and also selling ad banners with punching the monkey on it. That would be my own personal view. But anyway, let's not stop that.
Again, listeners, that is not a euphemism.
Yes. Oh dear, family show.
I'll rate it E this week. Don't worry.
Having said that, though, there have been some interesting bits of data and some good news for the industry. More listeners than ever to podcasts in the US, according to the Triton Digital 2024 US podcast report. They reckon that 44% of the US public listen to podcasts every month. Sounds Profitable's numbers are a bit higher. I seem to remember 53%. But in any case, they've gone up, and that's the important thing. YouTube, apparently, according to this, still continues to be the most preferred platform for a third of all podcast listeners. Apple Podcasts still seems to be going down, 12.2%. Apple Podcasts. I wonder what they could do to actually change that.
Release any features? Release the feature, Apple. Release the features.
I do hear that there is a feature being released.
Wow.
I'm not reporting on it because I suspect that whoever has told me hasn't understood that there was an NDA. But it's not a feature that you'll see in the Apple Podcasts app. We'll leave it at that. It's to make life easier for us podcasters.
So basically, no new features for Apple. And look, blink once, Apple Podcast team, if you're still alive. Just let us know that you're actually doing something.
So we will see. I think that the change that they're going to make is going to be a good change, because I think that will help move the industry forward a little bit. But it isn't something that a listener will see. But even so, that I thought was interesting. A couple of other bits of data that might be useful. A strong overlap. Who would have thought a strong overlap between newspaper readers and podcast listeners? According to a new study from the Media Audit. Apparently, if you read the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or USA Today, then you are almost twice as likely to listen to podcasts as the US average, which I thought was interesting to see. Also, in terms of data, there was a really interesting piece of information from Acast all around commuters, podcast listeners who listen to and from work. Super valuable anyway, because they listen to a lot of podcasts, but also it turns out super valuable because they react to advertising more. 22% more focused, 10% more likely to engage with ads, 15% more likely to consider podcast time an essential part of their day. So some nice data that has come out of that too.
Looks like CarPlay, offline playlists might be critical features for apps.
Yes, and I think particularly CarPlay, that certainly, or indeed Android Auto, is, I think, certainly something that's worthwhile bearing in mind, because there is an awful lot of audio listening in cars for obvious reasons. The other thing that I thought was interesting, it's not necessarily data, although there is a little bit of data in there, but it's something that I thought this was interesting, that it took the Germans to do it. The podcasters in the UK haven't bothered. The podcasters in the US haven't bothered. But the podcasters in Germany have put together a lovely presentation from both podcast publishers and marketers about the benefits of audio-only podcasts, and basically saying they are much better than video podcasts. Focus on audio-only podcasts because that is where the future of the medium is. Why it had to be the Germans doing this and not anybody else, I really don't know. But nevertheless, it's a great white paper. Now, the first time I linked to it, the white paper was in German, although the press release that I covered was in English. If you saw that and you thought, well, I don't speak German, well, that's absolutely fine. Take a peek at Pod News on Thursday, and you'll find it was also linked in English as well. So you can now arm yourself with all of the facts and the stats in there. What did you think about that, Sam?
Yeah, look, I think personally it's great to see that. And once you see it in writing, actually you go, obvious. Yes. Isn't it obvious?
Yeah.
It's like everything in hindsight is obvious once you know it. And I think this is one of those moments where you go, clearly, I understand it because that's what it reflects on my own behaviour. I don't watch, videos to the end. It's just not natural. But I might watch them. Why? Because I'm in the car. Why? Because I'm at the gym. Or why? Because and I can't get to my phone. No, I think that's great. Good work, Germans.
Why? The IAB would never do that, of course, because the IAB is there promoting video ads as well as audio ads, because they are not our friend. And if we had a podcast advertising bureau, maybe one of the first things that they would be doing is actually turning around and saying, no, audio podcasts are amazingly good for you advertisers. But no, all of the Americans and all of the Brits and all of the Australians have just sat on our hands and gone, whatever you say, Mr. Spotify, whatever you say, Mr. YouTube. And it's such a missed opportunity. So I'm so delighted to see that the Germans have ended up doing that. Grab the English version of that slide deck and use that to help you sell ads, is what I would say.
Talking of the Podcast Advertising Bureau, I mean, we have talked about the need, but how do we actually make it, manifest itself? Word of 2024. How do we do that? It's not going to magically happen, right? The PSP, unfortunately, is not going to make it happen. And I don't see companies combining. I don't see any of the big ad companies, which would be in their interest, like Triton, doing something. Or
but this presentation from the Germans shows it. I mean, that essentially was. Acast was in there, along with a company called 7-One Audio, Axel Springer, which is a massive publisher in Germany, IQ, the Audio Alliance, and various other people who I can't pronounce. So they've certainly done that. And I think if you look at the UK, for example, there has been a consortium of podcast publishers who have been making noises about the BBC and saying that the BBC should stop thinking about advertising within their podcasts in the UK. So all of that kind of stuff is going. We can see that podcast publishers will work together on things like that. So I think it's just another case of, these podcast publishers are working together on other things. Why are they just letting the IAB run this industry and own the relationship between them and the advertiser? To me, it's just a weird old thing.
The other things that you pointed out there. Okay, I've got a couple of questions. One is, why is YouTube still seen as the platform for podcasting? Is it because, look, it's a term I want to use for 25. Is it a super app? Is it a multi-function app? And that's why people go to it. They go to it to watch video, listen to podcasts, play music, go to look at a film maybe. Is that why it's dominating, or is there another reason?
The data says YouTube continues to be the most preferred platform for 33% of all podcast listeners. What that isn't saying is that YouTube gets the most listeners, or indeed that YouTube gets the most listens either. All it's saying is that people who've used Apple and YouTube and, whatever, prefer to use YouTube. And why might that be the case? Well, because, I don't know, maybe it's a decent app. But that doesn't say that the majority of podcasts consumed are on the YouTube platform. And I think that's, something that we kind of forget about, and it's probably important just to bear in mind. So that's sort of one side. But yeah, I mean, why is YouTube continuing to do really well? Why is Apple Podcasts slumping? Is it truly because no new features, although there have been a few new features in the last year? And Spotify seems to be doing pretty well as well. So, it's a curious one. Maybe Apple Podcasts, the lack of video in Apple Podcasts, I know it does it, but the lack of decent video in Apple Podcasts is one of the reasons. I don't know.
Well, I would say that may be one of them. I think, there's a dozen other reasons I could give you that they don't do. The other one, James, is we talked about the growth of users, which is brilliant. But why would anyone say, because from what you read, it would sound to me like advertising is flatlining. But we think it's not flatlining. We think it's going to burst through the 2 billion. Given the Roganomics and the political advertising, and the money must be coming towards podcasting. So why would S&P say that it's not going to go through the 2 billion mark for, another half a decade?
Well, yes. I mean, that's a good question, really. They say that things are going to decline in 2025, primarily since it's not an election year, it's not an Olympic year in the US, and this is just purely US numbers, of course. And so, that is one thing. But it doesn't really say very much more about the thinking behind that number. It's expecting that podcasting will triple in terms of ad share by 2034. So at the moment it's about 6%, and they reckon it'll be about 16%. And so it should do a bit better. But it's a curious one that I don't fully understand why they seem to be marking podcasting down.
Let's move on then to your friend Richard Stern, CEO of TuneIn. What's he been after?
My friend who doesn't talk to me. My friend.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Doesn't ring, doesn't call, doesn't send you an email. What's he up to?
No, indeed. Yes, he didn't talk to us, of course. You might remember I was doing some digging and asking. I just asked him one simple question. Can you tell us when we're going to be able to add podcasts to your platform? And he sent me directly to their customer support people, who sent me back the copy and paste, which they've been sending back since February. And then blocked me on LinkedIn, which is how I got in touch with him. So I thought, well, there you go. Anyway, he ended up talking to iHeart's Podcast News Daily, which apparently is a thing that iCast do. And they carried a full interview, and they probably carried the full interview for two reasons. Firstly, because, of course, it was also carried in iHeart's Inside Radio, and so therefore was talking to lots of radio people. TuneIn, hugely important to radio. And one of the things that Richard Stern basically said is, look, 96% of listening on TuneIn is to live audio. There's no revenue in us adding a podcast, he said. And so therefore, we're not really updating our podcast directory for anything other than our partners' podcasts. And he's got no plans to change that. Absolutely no plans. So it was interesting. And to give iHeart their due, they did ask him a few, difficult questions of, how are you making money, and why aren't you supporting podcasts, and blah, blah, blah. The only podcasts that are being updated are partners podcasts, because they get a data feed directly from some of those partners. And one of those partners, surprise, surprise, is iHeart. So that explains that one.
Don't expect a Christmas card. That's all I'll say. Now, is anyone else, James, do you think, going to start a podcasting newsletter?
Well, I mean, I hope so. There's somebody in Australia who stole most of my work and has produced something which looks awful, but it's still going. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there. But anyway, ignoring him, yes, there are a number of interesting people, including Katie Law from Pod the North, which is a newsletter all about Canada. And also, there's a new podcast newsletter covering podcasting in Europe, which is a little bit different, isn't it? You caught up with Andrea Koskaj.
Yeah, she's lovely. She's worked with Lauren Purcell and Ariel Nissenblatt over at Tinch. I say is working with them still, but she's moved back to Europe and she's started a new podcast newsletter called Eurowaves. So I thought I'd start off by asking her why she started it.
So Eurowaves is, not to sound cliche, but it is the first European podcasting newsletter. And my goal for it is to connect different European podcasting industries to see what the connections are, what the missing links are, and how we can come together more. Now, I'm also very interested in the rest of the world. So not only within Europe, but also connecting Europe and the US and, the UK specific industry, and beyond that, Canada and Asia and Africa. There's so much. So this is just the beginning, but that is kind of my vision for it. And yeah, it's been an amazing ride so far. Everyone has been so supportive, as people are in the podcasting industry. And just trying to see how I can be helpful and contribute to the growth.
Okay, we're at newsletter 4. When did you come up with the idea? When did you suddenly go, I want to do this?
Mm-hmm. So I would say it was about last fall, because I started working with Tink Media, which we'll probably go more into a little bit later. But I was very much involved in the US podcasting space. I was living there for 5 years. And just for context, I'm originally from Romania. And I have been back in Europe for about 1.5 years. And what I've been doing since I came back is trying to figure out how the Romanian podcasting landscape is, what I can bring to it, and what can be done really from everything I'm learning from the US podcasting space. And it's pretty limited. So that was disappointing, but at the same time, it's exciting because there are a lot of opportunities. And I said, okay, let me not just stop at Romania. I want to go beyond that, and I want to see what's going on in Europe. And to my surprise, there are so many amazing projects going on, so many podcast production companies, even, cross-border collaborations, which is one of the things that I'm most excited about. So that's kind of how the idea came together. I've spoken with a few people who were very supportive and gave me some ideas. Lauren was supportive from the get-go. Lauren Pacell, Ariel Nissenblad, who I also work with at Earbuds. Yeah. And I said, okay, let me give it a go.
Okay, let's cover them. We've mentioned them enough times already. So Lauren at Tink and Ariel, how did you meet them?
So, okay, to go back a little bit to where I was when I met them. So I was in the States for 5 years, and I was kind of in between gigs. I was freelancing at that point in podcasting, and I started out freelancing in production, which I really miss, and then also doing a bit of social media marketing, which, if you know Tink and if you know our opinions about social media marketing, it can be helpful to engage your audience, but it's not necessarily going to be the best for audience growth, which is what I also saw in my projects. And I was really looking to find a community of podcast lovers, as I am. I just love listening to podcasts, not only working in the industry, but I love the medium as a whole. So I put out an announcement on listservs, telling everyone that, I can be helpful with anything production, marketing, social media, just all the skill sets I had. And Ariel reached out at the time actually and said they were looking to add someone to the team. We had a call. We immediately had such a great energy. And as you know, they are really amazing people. And then it moved on from there.
So what was your role when you were there? Were you helping produce the newsletter? Were you helping produce? What were you doing?
So I'm still working with Tink Media and basically have been doing a lot of PR and marketing, and I've been loving it. I learned so much about the industry. I learned so much about what really builds an audience from that perspective of a community and engaging with them, and how impactful storytelling can be, which is what draws me to the medium in the first place. So that's what I've been doing, learning so much from everyone, and then also bringing in what I was previously doing to Tink, and this kind of multicultural international angle.
So what's your strategy for growth then for Eurowaves?
It's the same as podcast growth, I would say, because podcast growth is all about making podcast friends, and that's the industry as a whole. So my strategy for Eurowaves is continuing to build those connections, which is like the vision of the newsletter itself. So I feel like it's kind of self-fulfilling almost. And then, continuing to also support other newsletters at the same time, amplify them, amplify other creators, connect them, and then it happens.
Is there going to be a podcast?
Oh, great question. I had not thought of before, but that's how I
Really?
want to think. Yes, I've been so wrapped up in like, okay, writing the issue, sending this email, connecting with this person, and like the little tasks that add up to a lot. But yeah, it was right there. Well, I will think about it for sure now.
Excellent. 2025, what do you see happening across the industry? Given your years of experience in the US, now you're back in Europe, what does Andrea see going to happen in 2025?
Well, my hopes are for that international collaboration because I think there's just so much that we can learn from one another. As I'm meeting with more creators from Europe and trying to compare with what I know from the US, even the monetization models are very different. For example, Europe is very much subscription based. So, that's something that could be more implemented in the US. Obviously, the US industry is already at another level, but I think there's always more room for growth. And everyone's looking to diversify their income stream. So maybe paying closer attention to that. And then vice versa, probably putting more so an emphasis on narrative podcasts in Europe as well. And this is a pretty, focused look I'm taking at podcasting right now. It doesn't really talk about the so many other podcasting industries like in Africa and Asia and so many parts of the world. But this is what I'm hyper focused on right now. So that's why I'm talking about that. But I would love to see more narrative podcasts in Europe as well. And a lot more play with multi-language. I'm personally a language nerd, so I'm biased about that. I think podcasts can be a great way to practice your language skills. And AI is definitely helpful in that sense. That's the hot topic in podcasting these years, but I think it needs to be used carefully so that we still pay attention to the cultural differences, the nuances, and any kind of references that would make sense for a German listener would not make any sense for a Romanian listener. So you cannot just translate directly. And yeah, there are definitely maybe some tools that can be developed in that sense.
Yeah, one of the tools that we love is Wondercraft. They do a great job. They use the technology from 11 Labs to allow you to use podcast translation of your voice, but in your tone. So James has done a really good job of speaking Japanese strangely, or suddenly speaking Italian or whatever. I think Wondercraft's done a really good job, and I think AI has done a good job. So you talked about subscription. How does Eurowaves make its money then? Are you going to go subscription? Are you going to stay open?
I will definitely stay open for the most part. I think that's part of my personal ethos as well. And it's been a trend in all the work I've done so far. I'm also the founder of Her Time Romania, which is an NGO in Romania focused on leadership for young women and their personal and professional development. And so we did have some paid events and paid opportunities, but the main goal was really making education accessible for everyone. So that's definitely my goal for Eurowaves as well. What I would love, though, is to partner up with some brands, companies, creators who would love to promote their work. And, as I mentioned, Eurowaves is all about amplifying what's in the podcast community.
And will we see you in Boston at Podcast Movement, or will we see you in London at the London Podcast Show, or where else might we see you?
Yes, I am planning to come to the podcast show. It is not 100% confirmed yet, as I assume it's for most people, but I would love to join. I would obviously love to come to Podcast Movement as well, also because that's where Tink Media folks gather up usually, and we need to meet more often face to face because our energy just, virtually is already amazing. I was also thinking of Radio Days Europe, which is another amazing conference. As you know, it's in Athens this year. Yeah, there are a lot of great events. I also share in my newsletter for anyone listening who is in Europe or is visiting Europe at whatever point of the year. I do share different events happening in, Lithuania, Germany, Belgium, all over. So if you happen to be taking a trip somewhere and you're a podcaster, you might find an event. And yeah, it'll be included in the newsletter.
Okay, last question. If you could have one interview in the podcasting space, who would you interview?
Well, it'll have to be someone in the US space, because I have to say that's how I started out loving podcasting. I'm absolutely in love with Caitlin Prest's work at the heart. That was one of the first podcasts I listened to, and I can really see how it influenced just my podcast listening habits because they're always sound design heavy. So it would probably be Caitlin Prest. And then, I'm also very excited to be interviewing some Romanian podcasters because I didn't get to touch on it, but even though it's not as developed as I wish it would be, there are so many independent creators doing narrative work and really doing podcasts about social issues. And it's amazing. And I would love to share that more with the world because I think it needs to be more seen.
Andrea, tell everyone where they can go and get subscribed to Eurowaves.
You can find Eurowaves on Substack, and I post every couple of weeks. It's a bit of a longer newsletter, so don't worry. You'll be happy it's every 2 weeks, so you can catch up on it. You can also find it on LinkedIn, and you can find me on LinkedIn. I would love to connect and share more thoughts about where the industry is headed and what we can do to grow the industry as a whole and listenership. That's a huge thing that's on my mind. So yeah, I'm excited to connect. And thank you again so much, Sam.
Oh, pleasure. James and I really wanted to reach out and, help. So anything else we can do, just shout back. We're always there.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
The Pod News Weekly Review with Buzzsprout. Podcast hosting made easy.
Right, around the world, James, let's start off with India. What's been happening over there, mate?
What has been happening over there? Well, Amazon Music held a big...
Who?
Still going. Actually, Amazon Music is really big in India.
It is, actually.
Yes. I believe it's either the second or the third biggest. I think it's the second biggest podcast app in India. It does phenomenally well. And they held a India Pod Day in Mumbai. With a lot of interesting speakers there. So who knows? Maybe next year, Amazon. Maybe next year. But good to end up seeing that. Pod the North ended up giving us 7 podcast recommendations for Canadian listeners to help keep them informed and connected. Not that anything's going on in Canada right now. There's nobody breathing down their neck saying we would like to own you. They've got good, strong leadership. Our friends at PodX seem to be doing a bunch of interesting things. They have their company, Filt, has announced a reorganization. They've done a little bit of sort of merging with a company that they own in Finland, and they've launched across the Nordics, which is good. But they've also bought Oronda Studio, which is it's their second acquisition in Latin America, their first in Mexico. It's a big podcast company there that they have bought. So PodX is still on the on the go. So many congratulations to them for their growth. What else is going on, Sam?
Talking about moving on, is anyone moving on? Because let's talk about people and jobs. Where are they off to, James?
Yes, well, so there's a few new jobs. Jonathan Pascoe, who's a jolly nice man, has joined UK production company Listen as executive producer. He's got a video background. He used to work at MTV and Comedy Central. Before that, though, working on BBC Radio 2 on the Chris Evans Breakfast Show, I think, and on Heart with Jamie and... Harriet, I think, all the way back then, perhaps. Anyway, Jonathan now working at Listen. Listen, very excited about what they call a visualized podcast. But given that it's not available on podcast platforms, I don't call it that. I call it a TV show. But many congratulations, Listen. What else has gone on? Stephen TVO Holgren, he's a very clever man. I saw him at Podcast Movement in Washington, D.C. last year. He was working as a part-time CTO, or as a fractional CTO, as everybody calls part-time these days. Anyway, he's now joined as a full-time Chief Technology Officer for the company. So many congratulations to him. Ryan Morrison, who's worthwhile following on the socials. He used to be a BBC News tech journalist. He's now working as a content editor at 11 Labs, the voice and AI company. And some sad news out of the US. Gary Krantz, who you may know as someone who was... helping run podcast radio in the US. He also worked with me on our acquisition of the Podcast Business Journal. He has died. He had a long history of being in the radio business. Obviously, our hearts go out to his family. He was just 65. In terms of other things, lots of layoffs at SiriusXM, Sam.
Very serious. Why?
I see what you did there.
Yes, I'll get my coat. Right. Why are they doing that, James? Because it seems that they're doing fairly well. I mean, Alex Cooper with Call Her Daddy's moved over there, and they seem to be acquiring podcasts. I mean, they paid, what was it, $125 million to get her over.
Yeah.
So they've got the money. So what is this?
Yeah,
is this DEI?
They do seem to be going relatively well. Having said that, SiriusXM as a whole, it leans a lot on its broadcast because it does broadcast satellite radio. Leans a lot on its in-car stuff. That's where it earns a lot of its money, and all of that bit isn't working so well for them. But I think it does point to the size of the company. 100 people have been laid off at SiriusXM, which is 2% of the workforce. Just 2% of the workforce. They've got a lot of people working at that company. Earwolf has been looking as if it's been dying for a long time. That's their comedy podcast network. Amelia Chapelleau, who was executive producer at Earwolf, is one of those who's been laid off. And so I would expect the Earwolf name to continue to slowly go away. But they did make an interesting change, though, didn't they, over the week? Apparently, they've pulled their video versions of Call Her Daddy from Spotify. So if you want to watch the video of Call Her Daddy, you can watch it on YouTube now and the SiriusXM app. But if you're on Spotify, you only get the audio version now, which is interesting.
Ashley Cooper's got her own network called Unwell Network, and she's also done that with other shows. So Hot Mess and Pretty Lonesome, whatever.
Yeah.
Shows that I clearly have not watched. Yes, she's moved those all over to YouTube. So there.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So
didn't like Spotify's exclusive anyway. Didn't like Spotify too much.
Yeah, I wonder whether or not part of it is that they've been earning quite a lot of money from the audio version. And of course, as soon as you upload a video version onto Spotify, that overwrites the audio. So it actually makes it harder for them to monetize. I don't know, but that might be one of the reasons, perhaps. But still,
or the other reason being they have no idea, like the whole of the industry, as to how much you make with video yet. Come on, Spotify, release the numbers.
Well, yes, there is always that. Well, yes, it's possibly not for Spotify to release, but I'm sure that one of the partners will release some of that data in the next couple of months.
No. I mean, not how much have you been consumed, how much you make.
Well, yes.
Is it all those questions we've had a couple of weeks, you know, is it 0.00001p per video, you know? Yeah. What are you making?
Well, and also SiriusXM has signed the Fantasy Footballers. Again, that's a set of individual podcasts. Now, the Fantasy Footballers, in 2020, they were with SiriusXM. In 2021, they moved to Audio Boom. In 2022, they moved to Spotify. And here we are, 2025, and they're back at SiriusXM. The show once had a live show on Spotify's Green Room, if you can remember that far back. But they're going to have a live show again on one of the SiriusXM live channels. So, you know, Sirius still doing the deals. Which is always interesting to end up seeing.
Is this where we announce our deal with SiriusXM, or do we keep that till next week?
Well, we might keep that until. I mean, for somebody saying spill the beans of a deal that we've got, Sam Sethi.
Ah, yes.
I'm surprised.
Oh, moving on.
Moving on.
The tech stuff on the Pod News Weekly Review.
Yes, it's the stuff you'll find every Monday in the Pod News newsletter. Here's where Sam talks technology, even more so than he's been doing already. Sam, what have you got?
No Spotify so far. There we go.
Whoa.
Yes.
Yay.
Thought I'd feed back to everybody who's given us critical feedback. I was going to say criticism. Critical feedback saying, yes. Now, we're saving that for this bit right at the end, so you can tune out. Use chapters. We have them. Right. Podcast Vibes is a piece of research from Yuri Vyshensky. I'll go through that very fast so no one knows I got that wrong. He's using AI to extract subjects and emotions from individual shows. Tell me more, James.
I think this is really cool. So he has basically worked out, from my point of view, he has worked out using AI not just what someone is saying, but the emotion that they have. Is it sarcasm? Is it laughter? Is it humour? Is it nervousness? He's worked out all of the emotion alongside the words that have been said. And I think if you were to have a look at brand suitability scores, for example, actually using emotion is a hugely important part of that. Because if you can work out, when that person said that, they were being sarcastic, for example, then that changes completely.
Can it work out sarcasm?
Well, can it work out sarcasm? But it looked pretty impressive. So, so we linked to that this week. We also linked to PodOps, which has added a product called AI Blog, which is a new feature to turn audio into written articles, just like you've had with Buzzsprout, our sponsor, for the last year and a half. So congratulations to PodOps for that. Yes, that's one of the things that Co-Host allows you to do. It will take the transcript of your show and it will write a blog post if you want that, which you can then copy and paste onto your own blog. So you can check that out, obviously, at buzzsprout.com. String Bean Radio. What's String Bean Radio, Sam?
I'm not too sure, but when I looked at the link, it was a website which basically uploads the audio, reads the audio to try and find if you've been a guest on a show. And it caught Lex Friedman on 104 shows and Marco Arment on 88 shows. Gosh, that's what Marco does. Right. I wonder what he does. It's amazing. Right. I haven't even done 88 shows, I think. No. Anyway, but it looks very good, except it's very light in data because I looked for James Cridland and there was not a lot there of James Cridland, which I was quite surprised about. And the UI is pretty cool. What they're trying to do is find where you've been a guest or where you've been not obviously a host. And this is very similar to what Russell Harrow did at Pod2, which was to come up with a product he called Pod ID. He's in the process of completing that now. He's bought a new NVIDIA card to help him with transcripts. So we'll see if that helps. But yeah, again, I think it's quite good for discovery. If you can find out where people, it's a bit like a human pod roll. That's the best I can describe it. Where's James been on which shows as a guest? Because I like James Cridland and I therefore want to find out what else he says on other people's shows. Now, that's not easy to do. So these types of services, String Bean Radio, which I don't know why it's called that, and Pod ID are examples of looking at the transcripts, finding the names, aggregating that together in some sort of UI, which then I can then follow that individual and then get alerted when the next time you're a guest on another show that I wasn't aware of.
Yes. So, yeah, no, it's... Yeah, I mean, you can achieve quite a lot of this with the Podcast People tag, of course, but the Podcast People tag has a problem that you don't necessarily know that the James Cridland who was on this particular show is the same James Cridland as the James Cridland that was on that particular show. I mean, in my case, it probably will be because of my relatively unusual name, but if you're called Dave Jones, no chance. So,
yes.
So that's...
But having said that, Buzzsprout updated the person tag for us as a hosting company. You can now tag guests in episodes correctly as a guest using the person tag. And again, hello, podcast industry. Where's everyone else doing it? Why aren't we having those things done? They're super simple to implement. Why can't we do it?
Well, yes, indeed. Talking about podcast hosting companies, RSS.com, which I'm an advisor to, they've launched, it says here, a set of tweaks and updates, including a web player that now has iOS Dynamic Island support, which is very exciting. I instantly looked at that and I thought, Dynamic Island support, that looks amazing. I should make sure that I'm doing that for the Pod News website as well. But I think I'm already doing it. I think that's the media. Isn't that just the media API?
I'm not sure. I think it's that little black thing at the top of your fancy iPhone that plays what's going on.
Yes. So, and I think as long as you support the media web API, then I think that it supports that automatically free. But I'd like to learn a little bit more about that, so that's good. They also have what they call improved Podroll support. I have no idea how it's been improved, but nevertheless, support for Podroll is a brilliant thing. If there's one thing I would like everybody to be doing by the end of the year, it's Podroll. Because it's super simple, super easy, and it will grow the industry. I mean, it's a super obvious thing. But anyway,
have you given up on trying to rename it to recommend now?
I have. Well, have I cared about that in the past? I don't know.
I think a few people have. They've gone, oh, I don't like the name Podroll. It doesn't mean.
I think the name Podroll is awful, and it should never exist in UX at all. But but I'm not so sure about that. Anyway, that's what's going on. Excitement with Descript and with Riverside and all of these things. What's going on with those?
Well, Descript have announced that they've extended their language dubbing to 20 languages now. So if you've got a video and you want to then put it into different language and you don't want to ask your guest to redo anything, you can now put your guest into a Danish or Greek or Hindi or whatever you want and push that out. So it's quite a nice little feature. It's very simple to use within the video element of Descript. So congratulations. If you want to see it working, they have a live session on February the 4th. You can sign up on Descript and they're going to do a demo of that. Now, Riverside, I found, I was just hunting around and I hadn't noticed that Riverside had fundamentally morphed into StreamYard. Or StreamYard's been swallowed by Riverside. I don't know which way you want to look at it. But they've basically added live broadcasting to Riverside. Now, we used to use Riverside and it was great. It does 4K. It's very similar to Squadcast. So, pick your various platform. But now you can do things like live broadcasting to Facebook or Twitch or YouTube or LinkedIn, which is what I meant by StreamYard. It's taken all that functionality, one click straight into any of those platforms. And of course they use RTMP, real-time media player protocol, and that means that you might be able to take a URL and put it into the live item tag. So I'm going to try and test that and see if that works. Good news, I reached out to Kendall, who is their community manager at Riverside, and she'll be on the show next week to talk all about what they've actually done, so you don't have to listen to me surmise. And also, good news, they're going to be a sponsor for PodCamp 2.0, the event I'm running in London, and we will be using Riverside to broadcast live to all those platforms as well as Podcasting 2.0 apps. So that's what we're planning to do.
Very cool. Very cool. So tell us about PodCamp 2.0. Last week, I seem to remember that you dangled a big announcement that you weren't quite able to make in front of us last week. Is that still the case?
Yeah, God, I can send you the email, which was from the people concerned. We'll let you know on Monday. Where are we now?
Oh.
Yeah, Monday's gone. Hello. Can't announce things. Well, Can't announce it. But yes, hopefully I pray that one or both of them can make it. It would be wonderful if they can.
Some exciting things planned there. So PodCamp .live, is that where you go?
Yeah, podcamp.live, and it's on the 2.0 day, 20th of May.
Very good. Looking forward to seeing you there. I have sorted out flights and everything over the last week, so that's good too.
Yes. Now,
we haven't talked enough about Spotify yet. I don't think. I can see that there's going to be some people complaining. Why hasn't Sam talked about Spotify yet?
Yeah.
I'm imagining that one of Spotify's 47 different PR companies will be going, what's going on here? Is there any information at all that you can share with us in terms of Spotify?
No, let's move on. No, Spotify, for everything that we, as we say, are proprietary, they actually execute. Hello, Apple. Hello. We would talk about Apple and Amazon if they actually did something, but they don't. Now, Spotify have added gamification and badges. So they've introduced the Creator Milestone Award, which is a way of saying people who do 500 million all-time streams, or maybe 250 million or 100 million, which is their bronze level. So who's qualifying for these all-time awards then, James?
I mean, it's the YouTube thing, isn't it? You get sent a nice plaque from YouTube if you hit a certain number, and now guess what? You get sent a nice plaque from Spotify because Spotify want to be the next YouTube. So why not? But in terms of that, so in terms of gold, obviously Joe Rogan, Crime Junkie, Armchair Expert, Last Podcast on the Left. But interestingly, 2 German podcasts have also been awarded the gold thing. That's 500 million plus lifetime streams. And I looked at one of those, Gemischtes Hack, which has 285 episodes, which therefore means that if you do the math, then either they've taken an awful lot of episodes out, which might be true, or each one of those episodes has been played an average of 1.7 million times just on Spotify. And those are all in German. There are only 120 million native German speakers in the world. That is an incredible podcast. Now, they were exclusive on Spotify for quite some time and may even still be exclusive. I don't think they are anymore, but I know that Spotify does still have exclusives in other countries, not just in the US. But that's a big old show, 1.7 million plays.
That is a lot. Yeah. I mean, we're close, but that is a lot.
We're close. Dear listener, you can go and have a look on at our numbers if you wish on the OP3 platform. It's interesting as well that on the bronze one, which has 83 people who've won awards so far. That's for 100 million lifetime streams, except if you're in an emerging market, whatever one of those is, when you get bronze after just 50 million lifetime streams, which I think is actually rather a good idea. I've no idea what classifies as an emerging market, but I think that they're doing a good job here.
Yeah, what's interesting, they also put out, though, when you compare it to some of the biggest music artists like Taylor Swift, which is at 26.6 billion streams.
Yeah.
We have a long way to go still.
Oh, yes. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, that's all going on. What else is Spotify doing then?
Yeah, this is a weird one. Some new UI spots that we've found. Download to other devices. I don't even know what other devices would be, but they've added a new download to this device, download to other devices. So can I now share my Spotify podcasts, audiobooks and music tracks to you, James, or is it just within my family network?
I think this is, if I wanted to, looking at the UX, I would guess that I really like the idea of this podcast. I'm here surfing on my iPad in the house, but I actually want my car to download that, please, so that when I next jump in the car, it's already downloaded. I bet no one uses it at all. But
Jam, they're Jam sessions, yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I have used this sort of thing on YouTube. Because on YouTube, what you can do is you can ask for a playlist to be downloaded automatically if you pay for YouTube. And so I've asked it to automatically download my playlist. What's the playlist called? Watch list, or whatever it's called. The one that the basically the standard playlist that you have for something that you want to watch at some point, but you don't want to watch it quite yet. So I now, when I'm using YouTube, there are often shows that are about 40 minutes long that I really want to watch, but I don't have the time to watch them right now. So I will add them to my watch list. And I know that my iPad at the moment, and it'll be my phone very shortly, will automatically download those. So that I know that when I then jump on an aeroplane, I've got a bunch of shows to watch. And I don't have to sit there, the day before I fly and work out what it is that I'm going to actually download. So that's quite useful, I think. I can see that being useful, but it's a very niche thing. I mean, certainly I wouldn't have coded it that way. I'd have just coded it as, if you want to download a particular show to a device, we'll just have a playlist that automatically downloads. That would be the way of doing it. But
the other thing they've done, they've created a new Explore feature. I call it Tinder for Music. Is the best way I can describe it. Obviously very niche, but what you can do is listen to samples of music, literally, not even 30 seconds, and then you can share it. So what's nice about it, it is like Tinder. You swipe up and down to get to the next track, and it's a good way of discovery, really. You can get a quick feel. You can do it by hashtags. You can do it by music artists. So I think it's quite a nice little way. Again, what they're trying to do is find a new way to help people discover new music. And this is one interesting UI. I don't know if it'll survive, whether it's experimental, but you can go and play with it. It's live now. And you just, scroll up, scroll down. Very Tinder for music.
Cool. And they've done something in terms of episode notifications as well, where they've made those look a little bit prettier, at least on iOS they have. So one of the things I didn't realize is that from the notifications, you can actually ask for that particular episode to be downloaded or played or whatever, which is quite nice.
Boostergrams and fan mail on the Pod News Weekly Review.
Yes, it's our favourite time of the week. It's Boostergram Corner or Super Comments Corner if you're on True Fans.
Yes. Yeah, and backed by other people. People are agreeing with me. So, yes.
Anyway, there we are. So, yes, if you have a boost button or a super comment button in your podcast app, then hit that and send us a message and some sats as well. That would be a kind thing. Kyrin lives. He sent us a row of ducks, 2222 sats. He says, PodCamp 2 sounds awesome. I'll actually be in Europe around that time, so I'll come over and say hi. Amazing. There you go. Oh, that'll be fantastic. I look forward to welcoming you to my birth city, Karen. That would be a good thing.
What are you going to do with him?
I don't know. I'll give him some flat, boring beer. The last time I showed an Australian, a proper Australian,
right.
I took him to a pub and he says, "So what should I have?" I was thinking about a lager, and I said, "No, I'll get you a London Pride." And so I went to buy him a London Pride, and he came to me a couple of minutes later and he said, "James, I don't think this London Pride's. I think there's something wrong with it. It's much warmer than I was expecting, and it's really flat." No, that's London Pride. Yeah. That's what makes it great.
Yes.
Thank you to Seth S3TH, 100 sats for the Pod News Daily, which is very nice. Great show, says Seth. He'll never hear this, but anyway, it's nice to see that on True Fans as well. Look,
yeah, I know.
There you go.
We're alive.
Silas,
someone uses it.
Yes,
we're alive.
Silas on Linux, 1000 sats. Another grumpy message from Silas on Linux. Good that you two are keeping the money to yourself. What's the fun in hiring people if you can't underpay and take all the money yourself?
Yes, exactly.
Yes. And Neil Velio from Podnews, 500 sats, 10 out of 10 on the new production porn at the start of the episode, straight in with the, what's that, WIFM?
What's in it for me?
What's in it for me? Yeah. Straight in with the what's in it for me at the beginning to with slick, engaging structure. It's almost like you know what you're doing. I'm not sure I know what I'm reading. As for Spotify's latest attempt to own podcasts, it's like they learned nothing from Anchor. What? Becoming the biggest podcast hosting company in the world. What is there not to learn from that?
What did Spotify ever do for us, as the Romans said?
Yes, I've got no idea what that's all about. Leo Velio, thank you so much for that. He is, of course, one of our stupendous 16 power supporters. You can become a power supporter if you like. weekly.podnews.net. Go there armed with your credit card and give us a small amount of money or a large amount of money if you like every single month. That would be a lovely thing. Neil is doing that through Podnose, his company. Also, David John Clark, James Burt, John McDermott, Claire Waite Brown, Ms. Eileen Smith, Rocky Thomas, Jim James, David Marsell, Cy Jobling, Rachel Corbett, Dave Jackson, Mike Hamilton, Matt Medeiros, Marshall Brown, and Cameron Mole. Those are all the stupendous 16. We're wondering who the Sweet 17 is going to be. If you would like to be that person, weekly.podnews.net. That would be super excellent. So, what's happened for you this week, Sam?
Well, nothing. No, quiet week. Another quiet week on the trail. No, we added transcribe.fm to TrueFans, so Nathan Gathwright's company. But what's unique about it? Well, first of all, let's explain. You can now, as a creator, if your host doesn't actually give you a transcription, you don't have to move to another platform. You can stay where you are and then just press a buy transcript button and go and buy your transcript. And what's unique about it is we're using the technology we've termed secure RSS, but it's the protocol L402 or F402. And the idea is that the confirmation of the payment is first sent, then Nathan will then do the transcription and send that back after. So it's just a way of making a secure payment across any API using L402, but Nathan's implemented it for transcribe.fm, and we've added it to TrueFans. Yeah.
Very good. Yes, it's always good to see more different ways of paying and supporting people. So that's nice to end up seeing. You've also added currency support for New Zealand dollars, for Japanese yen, and for Canadian dollars, which is a nice thing. What's your creator portal customization?
Well, this goes back to the thing that Adam mentioned, the Rachel Maddow problem, as we call it now. How can we turn podcast pages in TrueFans from, what they look like as very similar to everyone else's page into a more customizable way? So little things that we're starting to add. So we can now hide comments, which is one of the features I think it's already on YouTube or other platforms, so it's not unique to us. But the idea is very simple. You might want to hide comments for the whole of your podcast, or you might want to hide comments for an episode. Simple thing to do. But the critical is we're now adding the first customization. So you can now reorder the tabs within your podcast page. So the default currently is your episode page. So I land on Pod News Daily. And of course, I want to see all your latest episodes. But for example, we do events, we do blogs, we do merch. So you might have an event coming up, and so you want your event page to be the landing page, or you might have, something to do with a new t-shirt that you're launching. So you can reorder those tabs to be what is the tab you want, or you can hide tabs. So that's a feature that we've added. So yeah, first part of our customization to create creator portals.
Very good. Are you working on anything exciting in terms of TV?
Yes. Yeah, we basically, I was just playing around with the Fire TV stick that we have, and I worked out it has an Amazon Silk browser. I've known that for ages, and no one in the world uses it. But anyway, it's on the Fire TV stick, and I thought, oh, well, go on. We're a universal web app, so let's go and try it. So I put in the URL for TrueFans.fm, and boom, it worked. And it's sized correctly. And I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then I went, well, how do you create an app? Because it's got an app store on the Fire TV stick. And it's pretty simple, actually. It's using HTML and JavaScript. You put a Chromium wrapper around it, and then you submit it to Amazon. And then it will appear on your Amazon Fire TV stick. So that's what we're doing. We'll be pushing that live this week, and you'll be able to then go to the Amazon Fire TV whenever they make it available. So don't try it this week if you're going, where is it? It's not our fault. We'll submit it. We just don't know how long it takes for it to populate. But yes, but it works, and it's good.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because you can imagine. I mean, if it works for Fire TV, it should work on Google TV as well, which is rather a lot larger. So but it's that would be interesting to see how much traffic you get from the from TV users, and I'm imagining that there will be TV users who might be interested in seeing the video versions.
Exactly.
Very good.
And then the last bit, just on a personal note, I'm doing my next leg of the River Thames walk that I'm doing. So Richmond to Chertsey. Anyone I should say hello to, James, that you might know along the way?
Oh gosh, not off the top of my head, no. But yes, gosh, well that'll be nice. Yes, you'll be walking past Eel Island if you're going down that way.
Is that where I can get eels, or is that just, why is it called Eel Island?
I think it's called Eel Island because, London in the 1400s, but it will be, but there's a number of different companies on that island. And you have to, if you run a company on that island, then you get a key to actually get onto the island and do stuff. Yeah, it's this tiny little island in the middle of the Thames. But and one of the companies who is there is now owned by Dolby. It's a large company that makes data stuff for in-car entertainment. So there's a thing. There's a thing.
So, James, come on, what's been happening for you? Have you bought your swastika?
I have not got any of these. That's going to get us demonetized, if nothing else is. I have not got a Tesla. No, I did buy a Chinese electric car, which I got delivered today. I went in and got it. And so that was exciting. It came with a little bow on it. Yes, from the dealership.
Red.
It's a white car because Australia and it's very hot. But the bow was red.
No, I meant was the bow red?
The bow was red.
Yes, you see, China. Yes. It's always got to be red.
Here we go.
Yes.
Here we go. Anyway, a few interesting things about that. The operating system in it is Android. It is, if you can imagine the worst operating system, the most badly coded thing you've ever seen, then it's that. It's really not particularly great. But, I've sort of played around with it and done a few things with it. It's kind of okay. One of the things that I enjoyed was it's got its own navigation system. Can't quite work out what it's using because it doesn't quite look like Google Maps. But I'm not quite sure what it is. But anyway, its GPS can't deal with anything because it put me in the middle of a field as I was driving to pick my daughter up from school today. So not quite sure what's going on there. But it also comes with Amazon Music. So you can sign into Amazon Music on the device, and it will then give you access through the SIM card that it's got, which I'm not paying for. It will give you access to the entire Amazon Music catalogue, which is quite interesting. So, so I thought that was a bit weird.
Does it have Google Maps in your car?
I do have Google Maps and Apple Maps in my car through my phone. Yes.
Right. Can you do me a favour when you're in it? Can you check if the Gulf of America is in there?
Now,
Google have changed it. Capitulating.
They have, but only in the US. So they've put the US into a list of countries. I think they call it their unstable country list, which is a bit of a mistake. But it's their finicky countries that insist on calling different things different names. Hello, Derry, Londonderry. So that's what they've done. So if you are American and you are logged into Google Maps, then at some point in the next few weeks, you will see it being called the Gulf of America. But if you are from Mexico, it will still be the Gulf of Mexico. Yes, which I have to say, I think is probably the right the right choice. Similarly, if you are in India, there are bits of some countries near you that you think are in India, but they think are not, and so it just depends on what what account you're logged in to. Depends on what the map actually says, and I think that's probably the right thing.
Yeah, Washington's been renamed as well, hasn't it?
Go on,
Trumpton.
There's a joke for people who remember UK television of the 19th.
Pew, Barnaby Grube, but Cuthbert, Dibble and Grub. Yes. Right.
Anyway.
That'll be cut. That will never make the edit.
Anyway. Moving on. Two other slightly more interesting things. I set up... So I've got an apps server, which is a very cheap little box that I hire from Amazon, which has, a SQL viewer on it and various other things that I use. And I thought to myself, brilliant, what I can do is, because I got to rebuild that box because it was running an old version of Amazon Linux. So I thought, right, well, what I'll do is I'll build this so that it's an IP6 only box, because I need to access it and I've got IP version 6. So therefore I don't need to rent for $1 a month an IP version 4 address for it. I can just deal with IPv6. So IPv6 is up and running, and that worked absolutely fine. But it turns out that in order for it to connect to my database server, which is also in Amazon, it needs an IP version 4 address anyway. So brilliant. Well done. Another Amazon Web Services triumph. But I quite liked the idea of just using IP version 6 for that. So who knows? Might come back to that later.
It's only 30 years that they said IPv4 would be gone.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, I know. Yeah. And also I've had some really interesting conversations with a man called Bill Shillett. Now, no one will know who Bill is, but he was one of the co-founders of Google Listen. And again, no one will know what Google Listen was. It was Google's first ever podcast app. And it came out in, I think, 2011 or so. No, it didn't. It came out in 2009. It was one of the first things that you could get, basically, on an Android phone. And really fascinating. Talking to him, he shared a few of the internal documents about how that app came up. And really interesting talking with him about how it all works and how the system, what the idea of the system was. Here's an interesting thing. Google Listen started as kind of a podcast app. It then morphed on the Google TV platform into, well, frankly, we would call it YouTube. The idea of being able to watch TV shows through your box. Because I think at the time Google didn't own YouTube, and so this was one way of helping them go into that. So I thought that was fascinating, and Bill has just shared with me, of course, Google Notebook LM is now doing what Google Listen was initially supposed to be doing, which was to produce automated digests of news for you. So some really interesting things. So I'm really grateful to him, and I'm writing up a sort of a history as part of the history of podcasting thing, a history of Google Listen, which was an app that really, never really got anywhere, but was tremendous. In fact, he even shared with me the numbers that they were getting in terms of downloads and things. Because the numbers that they were actually getting in terms of usage was really high for the Android platform in 2011, which hardly anybody was using. But they had 500,000 people using that every day. It was incredible. So,
yeah, very nice.
So I'm looking forward to writing that up. So that will be coming up at some point in the next week or so into the Pod News newsletter. And this time next week, I will be speaking to you from Switzerland, which will be a thrill. Yes, it'll be also very much colder than it is here. But there we are. So
reveal the beans, spill the beans. What are you doing there?
Oh, it's a conference.
Climbing the Matterhorn?
It's a conference for French language broadcasters there. So I am doing the opening keynote all about the future of radio. run away, is not what I'll be saying. And
can you just end it? The future of radio is podcasting. See what happens. Go on, do it.
Interestingly, I said, and obviously I'll be talking about podcasts, and the person that's running the conference has said, I wouldn't mention podcasts too much if I were you. Nobody listens to them, and they're impossible to earn any money out of. So I thought, well, that's interesting.
Oh, wow.
So anyway, yes, so I'm looking forward to going there. Neuchâtel is the place in Switzerland where I'm going. And yes, and I think I've got most of a free day there. So I'm looking for, if we've got any listeners in, no, okay. So there we are. So that should be fun.
I'll look up on my analytics on Buzzsprout. We'll see.
Yes.
The other thing I was going to say, talking of Google, have you seen they're still recommending Google Podcasts in Google search results?
Are they really?
Yeah, I'll send you the screenshot. It was posted on Mastodon yesterday. Somebody was asking about the best way to listen to podcasts on an Android, and it comes up with Google Podcasts.
Oh, you are absolutely right. Yes, because, of course, Gemini, of course, is stuck in a world where Google Podcasts still exists.
Exactly. In 2024, it was still there.
Oh, my.
So they're still recommending it.
Yeah, the good thing about Kargi, or Kargi, I believe it's now pronounced, which is the web browser, the search engine that I use, is we are now able to share searches with other people, which is really great, because if you want to show somebody how much better it is, because it doesn't use any of this stupid AI stuff, now I can share those links with people, which is rather a fine thing. So yeah, maybe I should do a little bit more of that. Anyway, that's it for this week. All of our podcast stories, of course, taken from the Pod News Daily newsletter, which you can subscribe to, podnews.net. You can also give us a review in your podcast app, and by all means go hard on the 5 stars.
You can support this show by streaming Sats. You can give us feedback using the Buzzsprout fan mail link in our show notes, and you can send us a Boostgram super comment, or become a power supporter like the Sensational 16 at weekly.podnews.net.
Our music is from Studio Dragonfly. Our voiceover is Arizona's Sheila D. We use Clean Feed for our audio, Hindenburg to edit it, and we're hosted and sponsored by Buzzsprout. Start podcasting, keep podcasting.
Get updated every day. Subscribe to our newsletter at podnews.net. Tell your friends and grow the show.
And support us.
The Pod News Weekly Review will return next week. Keep listening.